Critical race theory is making more than a few waves throughout the parenting and education communities, and frankly among anyone with a lick of common decency, because come to find out, people don't actually like their kids being taught that white people are inherently evil and that black people are weak and pathetic. So the left's got to change tactics. Now they're telling us that we're only criticizing critical race theory because we're all too stupid to know what it actually is. See, that's what progressives do. When they have a really terrible idea, or they get caught pushing some insane agenda, or they start getting called out for being the whack jobs they constantly expose themselves to be, we get told it's because we aren't enlightened enough to grasp their higher concepts. Disgusted over drag queen's story hour? Oh, well, you just don't understand transgenderism or the full spectrum of human sexual experience. You don't like abortion? Well, you just don't understand what abortion actually is. Upset over critical race theory? That's because you don't know what it teaches, you poor backwater, historically ignorant little fool. No. See, we know full well what it is. It isn't rocket science. We get it. And that's how we know it's a giant steaming pile of racist garbage. And we're going to rip it apart. From coast to coast, public school systems all across America are pushing critical race theory as part of their actual K-12 curriculum. It's a supposedly educational concept, also known as the left's latest tactic in brainwashing, that postulates that white people are inherently bigoted, that society is systemically racist in favor of white people, and that black Americans and other minorities are intrinsically victimized. And people are pissed about it. Multiple states like Florida have already passed bills banning critical race theory in their public K-12 classrooms. Parents, including white parents, black parents, Asian parents, and pretty much everybody in between, are speaking out against it at school board meetings. Even some students have taken a stand and demanded that teachers stop shoving this racist, divisive ideology down their throats. Here are just a few moms who've decided that, well, they're not going to take this crap anymore.
Just coming off of May 31st, marking the 100 years of the Tulsa riots, it is sad that we are even contemplating something like critical race theory, where children will be separated by their skin color and deemed permanently oppressors or oppressed in 2021. That is not teaching the truth, unless you believe that whites are better than blacks. I have personally heard teachers teaching CRT, and we have had an assembly shut down because Duval County Public School System consultant thought it would be a great idea to separate students by race. This is unacceptable.
We are now training our children to be social justice warriors and to loathe our country and our history. Growing up in Mao's China, all this seemed very familiar. The communist regime used the same critical theory to divide people. The only difference is they use class instead of race. During the Cultural Revolution, I witnessed students and teachers turn against each other. We changed school names to be politically correct. We were taught to denounce our heritage. The Red Guards destroy anything that is not communist, old statues, books, and anything else. We are also encouraged to report on each other, just like the Student Equity Ambassador Program and the bias reporting system. This is indeed the American version of the Chinese Cultural Revolution. The critical race theory has its roots in cultural Marxism. It should have no place in our schools.
My message to this district and the members of the Board of Ed: stop indoctrinating our children. Stop teaching our children to hate the police. Stop teaching our children that if they don't agree with the LGBT community, that they're homophobic. You have no idea each child's life. You don't know what their family lifestyle consists of. You don't know the makeup of their life.
So now the left has to change gears. They know they've been exposed as a bunch of race-baiting propagandists who are pushing hateful rhetoric in classrooms because God knows that we have to keep victimizing black people so they can never ever get off the government dole. What else is new? So in a new turn, they're now telling all of us and these moms that we just don't understand critical race theory, and that's the problem.
Critical race theory is an actual doctrine, academic method started by a bunch of scholars of color in the 70s and 80s. It attempts to question some of the race-neutral assumptions about law and power and how they function, particularly in the U.S. I will tell you, I'm not an expert at it. I've read some of it. Like any school of thought, there are critics in the field and between scholars within the field. I don't think it's the definitive word on race and the law or American history. But it's a very different thing than how the term has been applied by conservative activists.
Now, lately, there's been a phrase that news organizations have been throwing around a lot: critical race theory. Everyone is saying it, but no one seems to be able to agree on what it is. Now, how did we get to a point where everyone is saying a phrase they can't even define? Let's find out in a segment called How Did We Get Here?
Critical race theory is not being taught in classrooms at the kind of elementary school level. It is a college level or postgraduate discipline that I first heard about when I was all the way into law school. You're not teaching this. You're not going in and trying to teach this to kids in the first instance. It's kind of like white people being like, "Oh my God, you're teaching quantum entanglement to my children," and it's like, lady, I'm just trying to tell your kid why an apple falls out of a damn tree.
MSNBC's Joy Ann Reid, who somehow still has a show, despite the fact that the squirrels in my backyard probably have more value to add to the conversation, says people who are afraid of critical race theory don't actually realize their kids are currently being taught that slavery wasn't that bad. She tweeted, quote, "Currently most K-12 students already learn a kind of Confederate race theory whereby the daughters of the Confederacy long ago imposed a version of history wherein slavery was not so bad and had nothing to do with the Civil War, and lynchings and violence never happened." Who the crap teaches that? I grew up in a suburb of Richmond, Virginia, the former capital of the Confederacy, and I can personally tell you, we spent more time talking about the evils of slavery and the horror of Jim Crow than we ever spent talking about both World Wars and Vietnam combined. I'm not sure we ever even got around to Korea. Please show me one American classroom in which a teacher is getting away with telling kids that slavery wasn't that bad and black folks have always been treated like invaluable humans made in the image of God. In fact, go find me a leprechaun. It'll probably take less time.
I am a leprechaun, Kyle.
But see, we're supposed to buy that like it's true because we're too stupid to understand what critical race theory really is or what our kids are actually being taught. We are so stupid, in fact, that we can't even read. For example, here's the definition of critical race theory as laid out in Britannica that we're too dumb to Google. Critical race theory is an intellectual movement and loosely organized framework of legal analysis based on the premise that race is not a natural, biologically grounded feature of physically distinct subgroups of human beings, but a socially constructed or culturally invented category that is used to oppress and exploit people of color. Critical race theorists hold that the law and legal institutions in the United States are inherently racist insofar as they function to create and maintain social, economic, and political inequalities between white and non-whites, especially African Americans. Now, I may not have been inundated with critical race theory back in grade school, but I did learn English, and I can read that just fine, thank you very much. And you know what it sounds like? Racist bullcrap. Critical race theory and the current educational programs that are based on it promote concepts like systemic racism, unconscious bias, white privilege, and white fragility, and pushes them on kids who are often too young and too ignorant of history to be able to critically analyze this and challenge the concepts that are being rammed down their throats. In a nutshell, it postulates that America is built on racism that benefits white people and automatically disadvantages blacks. White children are taught that they benefit from this privilege, while black children are told that they are victimized by it, whether they feel it now or not. And to question any of this means you're showing white fragility. This isn't just critical race theory as it was first established in the 1970s, back when the country was much different, by the way. That argument is a smokescreen and we all know it. This is an entire educational framework that has sprung out of the latest social justice movement that seeks to pit minorities against white people and vice versa. It is the same hateful, racist, us versus them ideology that led one teacher at one elementary school in Cupertino, California, to force her third graders to rank themselves based on their privilege, or the Nevada teacher who was actually sued by a biracial student for making the class label themselves as privileged and oppressed. This past year, Columbia University held 6 separate graduation ceremonies segregated by race, income, and sexuality, so minorities would have a safe space in which to accept their diploma. That's where this dogma lands you. It's not just what it says, it's how it's applied. This is the same theory that suggests black Americans are so victimized that they can't get good grades or do math, so they have to be given a leg up by school systems like in San Diego, where the school district changed the way they grade kids because they felt too many minority students were failing. The new method even banned teachers from factoring in things like a student's behavior in the classroom or whether they handed in their work on time. Because, apparently black kids can't be expected to do the basics and have to be helped along by the same supposedly racist system that oppresses them all the time. Or something. Or like in Oregon, where the state's entire Department of Education decided it's racist to ask students to show their work or get the right answer, or even to give them grades at all. It's the same theory that leads to writers like Ashley Shackelford standing in front of an audience and telling all the white people that they were born racist and will always be racists.
White people are racist. So I put this up because I really want any white person in the room to know up front that this is what we're dealing with, that it's not going to be this coddling of white tears and what that looks like. We're not going to discuss, maybe some of us have worked it out. No, you're always going to be racist, actually. So even when you're on your path to trying to figure out how to be a better human being, because I believe that white people are born into not being human, like that actually instead of people of color and black folks being dehumanized, that actually everyone is dehumanized off rip within white supremacy, that y'all are born into a life to not be human, and that's what y'all are taught to do, to be demons. So in this particular way, white people are all racist.
Many people are upset that critical race theory and the curricula that are built on it are racist against white people, and it is. After all, I don't want my white son getting it beaten into his skull that he benefits from white privilege and ought to feel guilty about it simply because he's a white kid. But truth be told, this whole mess is pretty freaking racist against black kids. Maybe even more so. I don't know if all these high and mighty liberals grasp this or not, but there are an awful lot of very hardworking, very successful, very educated black people and families in this country. Maybe y'all are just too busy seeing victims you can exploit for votes, and for that matter, there are a lot of white folks who wish they had a little bit of the privilege you keep harping about because so far, they haven't seen a lick of it. Can you imagine being a straight-A student from a good family in a nice neighborhood and being told that you are a victim whether you like it or not because you're black, and that the kid sitting next to you has an automatic leg up in life because she's white? What crock is that? And how insulting is it to every single successful black American who proves that bullcrap wrong every single day? So yeah, Joy Reid and company. I can understand critical race theory just fine. I can also recognize stupidity just fine. And it looks a lot like a wealthy liberal from New York City with a Harvard degree and a microphone trying to stay relevant by pretending she's from some oppressed, marginalized people group and knows jack all about what they teach in Alabama elementary classrooms about a civil war that, by the way, has been over for 160 plus years. And that's your Reality Check America. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube and Rumble pages, like us on Facebook and Twitter, and stay sane out there.